Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now move to the next segment of the agenda, the launch of the World Public Sector Report 2019. I'd like to invite Mr. Liu and the Secretary General of the United Nations for Economic and Social Affairs to the stage to launch the report.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this luncheon event for the World Public Service Report. Having just witnessed outstanding examples of the public service initiatives from across the world, it is with great pleasure to present the World Public Sector Report 2019, a publication of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. There could not be more fitting occasion to launch this report than at this UN Public Service Forum. Since 2001, World Public Sector Report has shared trends, good practices, and lessons learned in public administration, and this forum is dedicated to excellence in public service. Over the years, the report has benefited tremendously from examples presented at the forum by United Nations Public Service Award-winning initiatives. This year's report is unique in that it assesses progress on institutional dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals as spelled out in Goal 16. Specifically, the report looks at global trends in transparency and access to information, accountability, anti-corruption, participation, and non-discrimination. It also takes stock of what we know about the effectiveness, outcomes, and impacts of initiatives that seek to address them. This is illustrated with examples from different SDG areas, including a dedicated chapter on institutions for gender equality. Let me take this occasion to thank our colleagues from UN Women who collaborated with us on that chapter. I would like to illustrate some of the trends covered in the report. In 2017, 118 countries had adopted a law or policy on the right to information, and 90 countries had the right to information explicitly mentioned in their national constitutions. As of 2018, 139 countries had implemented open government data initiatives that make data available to the public through central portals as compared with only 46 countries in 2014. Most governments now offer information and transactional services online, including e-procurement tools, with a rapid progression in the diffusion of such tools during the past few years. On participation, the past few decades have witnessed the development of participatory mechanisms. For example, the trends show an increase in countries that use e-consultation over time. Trends also show that governments often acknowledge how e-consultations have informed decision-making. On accountability, the effectiveness of oversight exercised by parliaments and supreme audit institutions varies across countries. Lack of resources and staff to conduct independent analysis and information gaps between governments and parliaments are key challenges. the lack of independence of supreme audit institutions remains a concern in many countries due to capacity issues. Regarding accountability in the public service reforms undertaken to enhance accountability have emphasized mechanisms inspired from the private sector, such as performance frameworks or performance-based pay. Yet, we know surprisingly little in terms of the impacts of such mechanisms on the performance and the effectiveness of public institutions, especially in a cross-country context. This is certainly an area that would benefit from more research. Regarding anti-corruption, there is wide mobilization to fight corruption, with many countries having adopted the laws and strategies and having set up anti-corruption institutions over the past 10 years. And while little is known about the effectiveness of those reforms, this is starting to change. Some organizations are looking into this, including, for example, the Open Government Partnership and the Global Financial Transparency Initiative. Lastly, in terms of non-discrimination, there has been progress in developing international norms, mirrored by developments in national legislation. However, available data makes it clear that discrimination is still prevalent and remains a formidable challenge. Beyond looking at broader trends, the report tries to make the link between the institutional principles of SDG 16 of 2030 Agenda and the way in which they are applied by public administration in its daily work. Another subject of the report is on gender pay gap. Several countries have adopted measures to address this. It will be interesting to see how effective these new measures turn out to be. The report also shows very clearly the need for continuing analysis. For example, is corruption in public administration less prevalent than it was 10 years ago? Have transparency initiatives led to greater accountability of governments for the delivery of public services? Is public administration doing a better job at fighting discrimination? Clearly, all communities working on SDG 16 still have much to do to better understand how institutions can effectively contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. Indeed, this is a challenge for all of us. We know that institutions that work well are crucial for delivering on the 2030 Agenda. Strengthened efforts are needed to measure progress on the institutional dimensions of the SDGs, in particular SDG 16. Distinguished participants, you have a direct view on what makes a difference in institutional performance for our citizens. I invite you to read and share the report and to participate in its next edition, which is scheduled for 2021. I now invite my colleague, David LeBlanc, who coordinated the preparation of the report, to share his insights. David.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Liu just presented silent highlights from the report. In the next few minutes, I would like to give you practical information about the report and briefly describe its structure and content. The report can be accessed from the webpage of the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government, or even simpler by Googling World Public Sector Report. The report comprises 5 chapters. The first chapter is a review of trends in institutional developments in the areas of access to information, transparency, accountability, participation, and non-discrimination. Mr. Liu just gave you examples of major trends that the report highlights. The review done for the report reveals that in many areas, our knowledge of the effectiveness of institutional arrangements is still very limited, that outcomes and impacts vary widely across countries, and that they depend on the broader institutional context, including the whole accountability system in a country, which includes the government, the parliament, supreme audit institutions, anti-corruption agencies, and many other agencies, as well as many non-state actors. The second chapter looks in detail at anti-corruption in the context of the SDGs. It shows the importance that international anti-corruption instruments have had for the evolution of national landscapes in terms of legislation and institutional arrangements to fight corruption. It underlines the challenge of coordination that can arise among all these institutions. It also illustrates how the success of anti-corruption reforms often depends not on single institutions, but on a layer of coherent laws, regulations, and institutions that all support the fight against corruption. This includes, for example, declarations of assets for public officials, regulation of lobbying, ethics charters for the civil service, and many other preventive and repressive instruments. Finally, and as importantly, the report shows how anti-corruption efforts are linked with risk and vulnerability analysis, including at the sector level, a link that is relevant to all practitioners working on the SDGs. The third chapter of the report looks at the national budget process as a key link between goals, strategies, and programs on the one hand, and outcomes on the other hand. The report finds that efforts to align national budgets with the Sustainable Development Goals have so far been limited, both in developed and in developing countries. Many countries have adopted limited approaches, from qualitative reporting on specific goals by the executive branch, to more complete mapping and tracking of budgets against individual goals and targets. Based on the current developments in this area, the report concludes that the capacity of national governments to track how public spending contributes to the SDGs will likely increase over time, but only slowly, and will remain highly variable across countries. The report shows how the institutional principles of SDG 16 are all relevant to the budget process, from transparency to anti-corruption to non-discrimination. The fourth chapter looks at risk management in public administration. Processes to manage risk in public administration have evolved quite rapidly over the past decade, driven in particular by development in knowledge and practice in different fields, and influenced by international and regional institutions through normative frameworks, analytical work, and technical assistance. While risk management at the national level is still primarily done on a sector level, recent trends point to a recognition of the importance of addressing risk in a more holistic way. Assessments of multiple risks has become common, with a growing number of countries having instituted national risk assessment processes. More countries now coordinate their risk management strategies and decision-making processes across various ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as across levels of government. Some countries also involve non-state actors, including civil society, experts, and the private sector, in all or some parts of their national risk assessment and management processes. The fifth chapter looks at public institutions for gender equality, both at the cross-sectoral and sectoral levels. It highlights the contribution of, but also the challenge faced by national mechanisms for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. It illustrates various tools that have been used to fight discrimination against women, both in law and in practice. It shows how efforts to enhance transparency and accountability in public administration can contribute to gender equality. And finally, the report illustrates the need for gender-sensitive anti-corruption efforts. One particular type of tools that the report examines is gender-sensitive budgeting. In recent years, gender budgeting has developed rapidly, with wide variations across countries in the details of how the related tools are used. The report concludes that the application of similar tools to other groups of the population that face discrimination is currently less developed. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Liu said, the report includes a number of examples from past editions of the United Nations Public Service Awards. Indeed, providing concrete examples of public service delivery is often the best way to illustrate the critical importance of effective institutions for sustainable development. The report also includes many references to recent publications and websites, which I hope can contribute to inform efforts by practitioners to improve public service delivery on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary General. Thank you, Mr. Leblanc. This concludes the morning sessions of the first day. We'll start at 14:30 with the workshops. I wish you a very pleasant lunch offered by the host. Thank you.